So that actually was kind of a helpful introduction to what I thought I'd talk about tonight. One of my most difficult teachers in life was illness. I say was, I'm not sure that that's probably the right tense. It probably was, is, and will be illness. And so I was thinking about how for 15 years, roughly, I felt a great deal of fatigue and a bunch of other symptoms that were more of a neurological nature that went with it, a strong brain fog and inability to get deep sleep and other things that kind of all gets called chronic fatigue syndrome in this culture, which was a name that I never liked because saying you're fatigued doesn't quite cover what it's like, doesn't quite suggest to people that you've just had a hard day or something like that. It doesn't suggest the way that you really feel like your body is ailing. And lately I've been kind of working with a phrase which I actually learned from Jeannie, which is what if this doesn't change? So we'll just suggest that to anybody who'd like to use that in any situation that they're in. What if this doesn't change? And during that time, it's kind of a balancing thing because when you're ill, you can't stop trying to get better and trying new things. But it was a very stern teacher in as much as I learned that when my mind dwelt on the future, that I would suffer. I would dwell on the future either in terms of anxiety, like I'll never be better, or feeling badly. This was going to be my life for the rest of my life. Feeling badly that I didn't feel like I could be the father and the husband that I wanted to be, that I couldn't work as hard to provide as I might have wanted to. All these sorts of things would weigh on me when I thought about the future. And also when I would try new things, there would be this hope, which would then most often end up in disappointment. I didn't really find anything that was all that helpful. And the past also was kind of fraught with suffering. I remember, it was very concrete for me because we had a picture of a wedding picture of my wife and I that I would keep on my dresser, And back when I was healthy, I used to love to look at that because it would remind me of this wonderful moment when we married and the love between us. And but as I got sicker, I used to feel pain when I saw that because I thought, that guy is gone. That healthy guy who got married, he isn't here anymore. And I would look in the mirror, and I would see this rather pale face and certain look in my eyes, and I didn't see that in the photo, and it would remind me, kind of somewhat painfully, of the past. I, at some point, just took the picture and laid it down because I didn't want to see it. I didn't want that moment as I passed from the bedroom and into the hallway, which I think for a while was a skillful response. But very gradually, I learned to stay in the present moment. I had to, if it hurt to go outside of it. And I think that's often the case in many situations, not just physical illness, but that surrender is about surrender to now, to live in the now. That it's not about tomorrow even, it's about today. And I'd find if I would just kind of be with, okay, this is how it is right now. This is how it is right now. Something would lighten, if I piled on and this is how it's going to be today, tomorrow, and the next day, and for as long as I could envision, There'd be this horrible burden, crushing burden. But it was like, okay, it's like this right now. And I can do this, and I can't do that right now. And so it narrowed my life down much more to the present moment. And I'm grateful for that. I feel like I learned something through being ill. I also learned how other people like to believe that their health is due to their virtue. And of course, there's a little bit of truth to that. If we have good habits, we're likely to have good health. I don't know that I got sick because I had bad habits. It was a bit of a mystery why it happened in a fairly stressful phase of life. So perhaps you could say, it was a response to stress. And I could certainly blame myself for being, not strong enough or resilient enough or something like that. But I didn't even know that it really had to do with the stress that I was under when it started. But I would talk to other people, and people are always wanting me to feel better and would suggest do this, do that, or would suggest, well, I do this or I do that. And what I started to realize is that oftentimes people would be making suggestions because it was hard to just take in how helpless I felt. And they wanted me to know I'm not helpless. You could try this. And they wanted to also believe that they had control over their own health, that they were healthy in some way because they were doing the right things. But you realize the corollary is I was unhealthy because I was doing the wrong things. And it's very hard to kind of be on the receiving end of that day after day. I did feel shame. There was a certain kind of shame that went with it. Like it was my fault that this was happening. And of course, back in the day that I had it, this wasn't really acknowledged very much as a condition. And so it was kind of treated as a psychological matter, like, as my doctor said, who, couldn't find any labs to tell her what to do about it, that maybe psychotherapy would help. So it was very confusing. And it was also a lesson in not knowing and really realizing that the authorities didn't know either. The doctors didn't know. And, going through the alternative medicine scene was interesting because they would always know, and they'd always have the solution and they'd always be very upbeat. And then months would go by and I didn't feel any change. And they would still be upbeat and know. And at a certain point, I would stop. And there was rarely acknowledgement, hey, this isn't working. Whereas the physicians tended to acknowledge, hey, this isn't working. And we don't know. So surrender, that phrase, this is the way it is right now, it's really, really valuable. And, and I use it now in a lot of different circumstances, but particularly when even though I don't think of myself as having chronic fatigue syndrome, it lifted after about 15 years. I still have a lot of symptoms, a lot of weird symptoms, and I don't have really robust kind of health. I don't have a lot of energy. And so, I wouldn't say I feel 100%. But of course, I'm extremely grateful not to feel how I used to. I also acknowledge once in a while to myself that I don't really control completely how I feel. I can do this and that. I've discovered things in that. I'm certainly a very proactive kind of personality, but there's a limit to that. And as I'm aging, we were talking earlier about aging. I hit the big 70 this year, and yeah, we don't always control how we're going to feel physically. I fortunately, pain has not been a big part of my picture, except kind of aches and pains. I guess there has been quite a bit of pain of late in various body parts. Um, but again, I did something about it, physical therapy and some functional strength training. And it actually helped. So there you go. There is something to do about it. And yet it's still kind of the same lesson. It's about coming back to the moment. Can I actually surrender to this is where the way things are right now? And can that surrender not be, excluding what could be done, but nonetheless, just like, okay, this is what life is. And one perspective that I've just found golden is that we come into this life to experience the full spectrum of what it is to be human. We don't just come here to get all the goodies and avoid all the baddies. In case you haven't noticed, that doesn't work. It's not the case. We get a mixture all the time of what we want and what we don't want, what seems desirable and what seems undesirable. But when I shift to the state of mind that says, every human experience has dignity, even the suffering ones, even the physically suffering ones, that to be able to be conscious and know that there's some dignity to it. And so I've sometimes shared the phrase, I really want to be here for this, but sometimes the phrase sounds more like, I'm willing to be here for this. I'm willing to know this experience. And in knowing it, I'm going to actually know what a lot of human beings experience. And that matters. When I think of it that way, it softens my heart. It softens me to know, okay, this experience of not feeling so great right now, this is actually what many human beings feel right now. And I'm willing to know it. So we're at the end of our time. I'm going to stop here, but I think I got the essence across. So have a good week.